The morning Natalie Cross almost died, she was answering emails. That was the part that stayed with her afterward, the specific mundane cruelty of it, that she had been sitting in the back of a hired car, reading quarterly projections on her phone, completely sealed inside the pressurized world of deadlines and board meetings, while outside the window, Chicago was doing what Chicago does in November, turning the streets into something treacherous and indifferent. She was the CEO of a medical supply company with 400 employees and a net worth that had taken 17 years of relentless, bone-deep work to build. She had spoken at conferences in Berlin and Singapore. She had been on the cover of a business magazine at 39 with a headline about women who refused to wait for permission. She was, by every external measurement, a person who had things under control. She did not have things under control when the car hydroplaned on the Lake Shore Drive overpass and hit the guardrail at an angle that sent it tipping, then rolling, then coming to rest on the driver's side in a ditch off the shoulder, 20 feet below where the road had been. She remembered the sound first. Then the stillness. Then the smell of something burning and the awareness, slow and syrupy, that she could not move her left arm and that the window beside her head had become the ground. She heard him before she saw him. Hey, I need you to stay awake. Can you hear me? Keep your eyes open, okay? I've got you. You're not alone. His voice was calm in a way that didn't feel performed. It was the calm of someone who had decided, in a split second, that panic was not an option, and had simply chosen something else instead. His name, she would later learn, was Marcus Webb. But in that ditch, in those first terrible minutes, he was just a pair of hands and a voice, and that was everything. He had been driving behind her on the overpass with his 7-year-old son, Eli, in the backseat. He had watched the car go over. He had pulled onto the shoulder, told Eli to stay buckled and not move, and climbed down that embankment in a November coat without hesitating, without filming it, without doing anything except going toward the thing that needed him. He pulled her door open with a strength she couldn't account for. He checked her neck before he moved her, careful and deliberate, and she would think about that later. That he knew to do that instinct or knowledge or simple human decency had made him careful when carefulness was exactly what saved her from something worse. He got her out and onto the grass and sat beside her with his hand on her back, talking steadily, keeping her anchored to consciousness until the sirens arrived. When the paramedics came down the embankment, she reached for his arm. "Don't go," she said. She didn't know why she said it. She was not a woman who said things like that. "You're okay," he said. "They've got you now." And then the paramedics were around her, and the world became urgent and loud, and when she turned her head to find him, he was already climbing back up toward the road. She saw him for just a moment at the top of the embankment, a man in a dark coat, reaching back to take the hand of a small boy who had been waiting exactly where he was told. Then they were gone. She spent 4 days in Northwestern Memorial with a fractured wrist, 2 cracked ribs, and a concussion that made the lights feel like something personal. Her assistant, Priya, flew in from New York. Her board chair sent flowers that filled half the room. Her inbox generated itself into a small catastrophe that Priya managed with terrifying efficiency. Nobody could tell her who he was. The paramedics hadn't taken his information. The police report listed an anonymous bystander who had rendered aid and departed before officers arrived. She hired a firm, quietly and at considerable expense, to find him using traffic cameras, and the partial description she gave: tall, late 30s, dark coat, a little boy with a red backpack. Chicago is a city of 3 million people. The firm came back with nothing actionable. She thought about him constantly. Not romantically, not at first, it was something more fundamental than that. It was the need to close a loop that felt important in a way she couldn't fully articulate. Someone had held her hand in a ditch when she was broken and frightened and had asked for nothing in return. She needed, at minimum, to say thank you. She needed him to know that she had not simply absorbed his kindness and moved on. She went back to work 6 weeks later. She was different in ways she couldn't fully explain to the people around her. She moved more slowly. She listened longer. She started leaving her phone face down during meetings, which her executive team found so alarming they asked Priya privately if she was all right. She was more than all right. She was recalibrated. 3 months after the accident, she was speaking at a nonprofit luncheon on the North Side, a workforce development organization that helped single parents finish degrees while working full-time. She had donated to them for years, written checks from a distance the way busy people do, commerce mistaken for connection. But she had asked to speak in person this time, because she was trying, now, to show up rather than just contribute. She was halfway through her remarks when she saw him. He was sitting at a table near the back in a collared shirt that suggested he'd made an effort, and beside him, swinging his feet because the chair was too tall, was a boy with a red backpack hanging off the back of his seat. Natalie Cross stopped speaking in the middle of a sentence. The room noticed. 400 people noticed. She didn't care. She stepped away from the podium and walked to the back of that room, and she watched his face move from polite confusion to recognition to something complicated and private that he tried briefly to contain before it became too large for that. She stopped in front of his table. "It was you," she said. He nodded once. "Why didn't you stay?" Marcus Webb looked at his son for a moment, then back at her, and when he answered, his voice had the same quality it had in the ditch, quiet and decided, free of any need for credit. "You had people coming," he said. "You didn't need me anymore." And Eli had been sitting alone long enough. She sat down at his table uninvited. The room was utterly silent. The luncheon organizer stood at the side of the room with her hand over her mouth. She learned that Marcus was 38. That he'd been a single father since Eli was 2, since his wife passed from an illness that had moved faster than any of them were prepared for. That he worked as a logistics coordinator during the day and was finishing a business degree at night through the very organization that had just given him a scholarship to complete his final year. That he had driven down Lake Shore that morning because it was his turn for school drop-off and the highway was faster. That he had not told anyone what he'd done. Not his mother, not his friends. He'd gone home, made Eli a grilled cheese sandwich, helped with homework, and gone to bed. Why? She asked, and she meant all of it. Why help? Why disappear? Why carry it so quietly? He looked at her like the question was genuinely puzzling to him. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said. That's all it was. Eli looked up from the bread roll he'd been methodically destroying and studied Natalie with the frank assessment of a 7-year-old. "Dad says you help people because it's right," he announced, "not because somebody's watching." Natalie Cross, who had not cried in a board meeting in 17 years, who had built a company on precision and composure, pressed her fingers briefly to her mouth and collected herself with the focused effort of a woman operating at the very edge of her own restraint. Then she looked at Marcus Webb and said, "I'd like to offer you something. Not because I owe you. Because the world needs more of whatever raised you." He started as her company's director of community partnerships 7 weeks later. He finished his degree that spring. Eli still brings the red backpack. And every November, on the anniversary of the day a stranger climbed down an embankment without hesitating, Natalie leaves her phone face down and sits quietly for 10 minutes, grateful beyond language for the specific miracle of a good man who simply decided to show up.